go. What is up, X-Men fans? Simon here. Welcome back to my HannaTalk. Hope everyone is doing absolutely fantastic. And today I'm here with a really special guest. Now, he is an actor who has been best known to fans from playing characters across the comic book universe, whether that's been Nightmare in Hogwarts Monsters Dwell to Magneto in X-Men 97, which is now ready to premiere season 2 later this year, to even stepping into the DC universe as Etrigan in Batman: The Doom Who Came to Gotham. But he's also been known in franchises, whether that's been from the Lego world to Harry Potter through Hogwarts Legacy, as well as video game franchises from Devil May Cry to Castlevania and League of Legends to Final Fantasy and so much more. Please welcome to the channel the amazing Matthew Waterson.
Hi, Simon. Thank you so much for having me.
That's absolutely no problem at all, Matthew. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm glad we were able to do this.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, just to kind of address this first little thing, because it's been about a year since the fires in LA had happened
Yes.
and everything, which I'm really, really sorry to hear about all that. That was just absolutely like devastating and really shocking when that happened. How are you
Yes.
doing? And how is like your family and friends doing, but also the wider community of LA doing?
Thank you for asking. We were very lucky. We're actually a little north of LA. Where we are, there had been a big fire in, I think, 2018. So we actually were okay because we were a little away from it. And I think also because most of the easy burnable material had already gone up a few years earlier. It's it's interesting. I have to drive down the Pacific Coast Highway to get to some studios to work, and it was closed until, I don't know, about 4 or 5 months ago. And the first time I went down it after it had reopened was strange, not because of the destruction, but because they had cleared so much of it, and the destruction where it occurred was so complete that there were long stretches where you can see the ocean where there used to be houses, but there was nothing now. You didn't there was no rubble. They cleared everything. So if you didn't know, or you didn't know what you were looking for, you wouldn't necessarily be as aware. But when you know what you're looking at, or you know what used to be there, it just used to be, solid homes. That's obviously been a big deal. I actually was down there this week for something, and this was the first time that I'd started to see construction crews beginning to rebuild. And I have a friend who's a writer who lost her home. She and her daughter were not home. They were actually on vacation in Asia at the time. But they just started rebuilding their home, in the last couple of weeks. So, you something like that, especially I think it's like 12,000 homes that were lost, or 12,000 buildings. That's not going to be rebuilt overnight. It's going to take a while, but they are, the people are moving forward with that, and it's one of those things that it happens, and it's almost impossible to sort of get your head around, but people figure out a way back. And it was funny because I actually, AJ Locasio and I, AJ, who plays Gambit, were going to a convention right in the middle of it, and we actually had to push it back because we couldn't get on a plane. We also were like, well, do we even go? Because we don't want to leave our families and things. And we sort of spoke. One of my close friends is a firefighter up here, and is a wildfire firefighter. And I talked to him, and he said, because he lives 2 minutes from me, and he said, no, we're fine up here. But it was kind of crazy to fly out of Burbank Airport, and you could see just the layer of smoke, and from where the fires were. That was the Altadena fire was the one that was close to. But it was a living in Southern California, you kind of assume that at some point there's going to be a big earthquake that's going to wreck everything. A fire of that magnitude was not something that I was, I was sort of expecting to be the thing that decimated such a large swath of the city. But people are people, and everybody is doing their best, and people are starting to rebuild, which is amazing.
No, that's absolutely fantastic. That like, especially because like when that news first broke out and everything, which was just absolutely crazy and everything. But it's like, wow, that I mean I've heard about like a lot of events that have happened in America in the last few years and stuff and before then, but it's like to get hit with a punch like that is just absolutely insane. But it's absolutely fantastic to hear that everyone is now on that stage of rebuilding and recovery. and everything. And even though it has been about a year since it all happened, it's like as you said, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but you're on the
Yeah.
stage to sort of heading towards that road to recovery and road to rebuilding everything after such an incredible event like that. But no, that's absolutely wonderful though. Absolutely fantastic. Now, going into the first question I ask every guest on the channel, how did acting sort of start for you?
I had always been interested in it. I came out of an entertainment family. My parents both work production, and when I was a kid, I used to badger my parents to let me, do something on one of their shows, and they finally let me do like one episode of one sitcom when I was about 5, and they said, "That's it. You had a chance. You're done now." Uh, and so then I continued on, and then when I was sort of finishing up university, I sort of told them I think I still may want to do that. And so then sort of went into it from there. But I wasn't studying it in university or anything like that. I was like, no, I was of the like, I'm going to get my full education, and then if I'm still interested, I'll go into it then. But once I got out of university, I was back in Los Angeles and I was working production on stuff that as my sort of survival job. But I had almost immediately started, finding teachers and classes and things like that. And I did that for a few years in LA, and then decided if I was going to do it, I wanted to actually train. So then I went back to London to go to Lambda and train in classical theatre there. And that was when it sort of switched from being a thing that I like was interested in and was trying to do to like, no, that's kind of what I am and what my focus is on. So after I finished at Lambda, I then moved to New York, and I was in New York for a little under 10 years, and then moved back to California at the point when my agency had sort of said, we think that you have a good chance of being able to work in animation and video games. You People need to be able to meet you in person, so you kind of need to be out in LA because a lot of that starts there. So that was when I sort of made the shift back to California, and fortunately they were right, and I've been able to kind of support myself since I made that move in as an actor.
Wow. No, that's absolutely fantastic in that regard. And especially like hearing the story about like how you started as a child and everything with your parents having been actors themselves and
No,
stuff.
my parents were production. My
Ah,
dad is a like a line producer, and my mother is an AD, associate director. And
wow.
so that was what it was. My father was running a company called Whit Thomas for the 80s, and Whit Thomas were like Whit Thomas and Carsey Werner were kind of the two big sitcom houses. Like Whit Thomas did Soap and Benson, Golden Girls, Beauty and the Beast, It's a Living, the John Larroquette Show, Herman's Head, Nurses. They did a whole ton of stuff, and then they would do movies from time to time as well. But my dad was focused on the television aspect of it. So yeah, so that was the other thing. My parents had warnings for me, but theirs were different from some parents who are like, what is acting? My parents' take on it was, if that's what you want to do, great. You need to understand that the actors who we know, who you know through us, are the tiny sliver who actually are successful. Like, because we work production, the actors who we know are the actors who are on network television shows in the 1980s and 90s. Like, that is not a accurate representation of what being an actor is, because those are the people who grabbed the brass ring and were successful. So it was a sort of case of like, just know that's not the standard. You're not going to just walk into being on, Golden Girls or Blossom or something like that. That's not how that happens. So it was great to have, to have seen all of that growing up, but also have like a good understanding of like, okay, that's what you're going for, but also like that's a tough place to get to.
No, that's absolutely true in that regard. And especially because in like the fact of where the industry is like, it's especially being part of an industry that's constantly evolving, constantly changing on the go and sort of that stuff. But how important do you think it is for people to have that sort of that way of doing things, which is talking to people, having the connections and networking, but at the same time, adapting to how much the industry is evolving and changing by utilizing social media, utilizing technology like we've got at our disposal and everything, sort of being in the middle between those two things.
Honestly, I'm crap at a lot of that stuff. I'm terrible at social media. I'm very lucky at the moment that in X-Men and in most of the video game franchises I get to be a part of, there are always some people who are great at social media, and so I can just kind of repost their stuff, and like X-Men has a big cast, so there's always somebody who's doing something, so I can post that kind of stuff. I am not good at it. I try to sort of have a better understanding of it because I know its importance. But my my dream is to get to a point where I don't have to have any of that. It's unnecessary. But you're not wrong that it is an important part of it, and a lot of people who are able to push themselves, to once they start working or start, getting involved in a certain part of the industry, are able to push themselves into more areas, are able to do that because they have a really good understanding of how to connect to their audience on social media. And also, it goes together with people who are good at making connections and working a room and things like that. And a lot of the time that gets looked down on, and people like, oh, that person just, goes in and schmoozes. And there are two ways to do that. There is the, very mercenary way of doing it that eventually everybody sort of feels used. And then there are the people who are just warm and welcoming and everybody wants to be around. And those sorts of people, quite rightly, get involved in stuff. And one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given by somebody was, if and this was in auditioning for like a film or TV show or something like that. He said, think of it this way: whatever you're auditioning for, that role is not available. He said, because either it's a big role and they're going to get a name, or it's not a big role and the writer, the director, the star, the producer has a son, a daughter, a brother, a boyfriend, a girlfriend, or something who they're going to give the job to, because it's not a job that, they need a name in. He said, so don't worry about trying to get that job or do that role. He goes, go in and do the best that you can do at what you do. He said, but here's the most important part. As he put it, be someone they want to have a beer with. He said, because he goes, this is how it's going to happen if it happens. Someone is going to be making a $150 million movie that is going to be shooting entirely in Morocco. And 6 days before and it's going to have a cast of, with like these 6 big names in it. And 7 days before they leave, Chris Hemsworth is going to drop out because he's going to go and do a Scorsese movie. And they're like, crap, we need to refill that. There's none of the other Chris's, none of the people who are that physical type and that character type who are famous are going to be available then. And they're going to go, okay, we got to pull somebody who can do it. Oh, if I'm going to be stuck in the desert for 8 months shooting a movie, which is incredibly stressful, and that guy kind of fit the same physical type, and he was cool. If I'm going to get stuck in the desert, let's get stuck in the desert with that guy, kind of thing. He said, that's where those breaks come from. And the good example of it would be like Hugh Jackman, who, got Wolverine because I can't remember what's his name was held up shooting Mission Impossible, and so they were like, we have to go. Well, there was that Australian guy who we really liked, but nobody ever heard of him. We don't have time, but it's going to cost us more money to delay it, to recast. So he was great, but he just wasn't famous. Let's put him in. He said, like, so what you actually need to do is you need to make sure that you're somebody who, basically what he was saying was, be a good, nice, and personable human being, so people aren't horrified at the idea of spending time with you. And that seemed like strange advice, but it also is, it's really good, because nobody wants to be stuck on a film set or a TV set or in a recording booth with someone who's an arsehole.
No, absolutely. No, that definitely makes sense in that regard. It's like the old expression, I think, a couple of things from that is, as you said, is being just a nice, humble human being, just in general, which I remember it was from the advice from James Gunn from an interview that he did when he was promoting Superman last year, which he said that he's got a no bullshit or no asshole policy
Sure.
when it comes to a lot of his productions and stuff, which I know a lot of people tend to criticize James Gunn quite a fair bit for a lot of his castings and stuff, but he's known for being very particular when it comes to his casting process in finding the best actor for that role, but at the same time, also someone that is easy to work with and is not going to be like have like huge egos or anything like that during that production. And on the same token, it's like the old expression that goes, "It's not what you know, it's who you know."
Mhm.
I personally think it's a bit of what you know and it's a bit of who you know.
Absolutely, it's both.
It's
Like,
definitely both.
if you're terrible at what you do, it doesn't matter how much somebody likes you. There's a limit to how much they can help you. It's the same thing of like the everybody has family members who every athlete or movie star or director or musician have kids who want to do the same thing, but they're Jake Gyllenhaal or Maggie Gyllenhaal or Gwyneth Paltrow have careers for a reason. It's because they were actually good at what they did as well. There's every athlete whose kids decide to go into the same sport don't also make it and are not also successful, because that's not enough. And same with music. Like you may be, Bob Dylan's son, but if you can't write a good song, you're not gonna, you're not gonna go anywhere. Jacob Dylan wrote good songs as well, so he had a career. Like it is absolutely both, and also, like, I completely understand when you have somebody who works with a lot of the same people a lot, because if especially if you're doing on camera stuff or theater, if you're doing film or TV or theater, you're stuck with those people for a long time. You might as well be with people you like.
Absolutely. I
And
mean,
one of the things that I've loved about voiceover is that I saw an interview, and I've told this story a number of times. I saw an interview a long time ago, Diedrich Bader, who is on, he became famous. The biggest one was for like the Drew Carey Show, which was a sitcom that was worth $1 billion or something because it was huge. But he's been in a ton of movies and he does a ton of voiceover. And in an interview a long time ago, somebody asked him about doing voiceover, and the story or the explanation that he gave, I have found very accurate, which is he said, when the Drew Carey Show became worth $500 million to Warner Brothers, if I'd wanted to turn into a dickhead, I kind of could have, because it was worth so much that unless I was doing something that threatened the show or was like illegal, they weren't going to get rid of me. He said, and I've seen people become successful in TV shows or things who kind of turned unpleasant because they knew they could get away with it. He said, the thing that I've loved about voiceover when I do that is there's nobody who you can't find a voice match for. So if somebody turns up and is a real pain, they'll just replace you. He said, so my experience has been, I really like doing voice work because the people are lovely. And that has been my experience. Like, the people who do the kind of stuff that I do have just been absolute sweethearts. Everybody who I've met and everyone who I've got to work with has been lovely. And it's been really, really nice to do a job where even if I look at a call sheet or I show up for something and I don't know anybody there, like, the chances are everyone here is going to be lovely.
absolutely. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And speaking about, of course, with voiceover stuff, what was like your first voiceover role, and what was it like stepping into that particular role or world, like for that role and everything?
It's funny. So the very first voiceover job I had, um, came about because like I said, I worked production when I was right out of, still in university and right after university as my survival job. And one of the jobs that I did a lot of live television, a lot of like award shows and specials and things like that, television specials. And one of the ones I did was an award show here in the States called the People's Choice Awards, which is just kind of like a vote in kind of thing. And one year I did it. They had two categories. Like, I think it was like best new comedy, TV comedy, and best new TV drama. That they were going to literally let people vote during the show and announce the winner at the end of it. The rest of them, everybody kind of knew coming in. And that year, a Damon Wayans sitcom called My Wife and Kids won the best comedy show. But the thing about it was they had these big crystal awards, and usually the winners' names were etched on it, but they couldn't do that on these because they were only finding out on the show. So they gave each show the award, and then like 2 days later, production had to go and get the awards back so that the names could be etched on them. And I was just working as, I don't remember if I was a PA or a production coordinator or something on it, but one of them, and I was going to be near Disney where they shot that show. And so I was like, hey, somebody said, hey, can you just run into their office and pick up the award from them so we can bring it back and get its name etched on it? And I said, sure. And so I went and I showed up and I got in, and I got into their production office and it was empty. It was like a ghost town. There was nobody there. And I'm like, this is weird. So I'm sort of wandering around saying, hello, is there anyone around? And like, all of a sudden, one office, there's a woman sitting in it. And I just said, oh, hi, I'm here from People's Choice Awards. I need to grab your award so we can engrave your name on it. And she sat behind the desk and she looked at me and she went, you're English? And I said, yes. She said, are you an actor? And I said, yes. She goes, great, come with me. This sounds like a made-up story. It's not. She takes me. Everybody in the office was not around because they were in the conference room doing a table read for the episode for that week. And the showrunner of that show is a man called Don Rio. Don had also been the creator and showrunner for Blossom, which was a show my dad had done. So he didn't know who I was. I knew who he was, and I knew his face. This woman leads me, opens the door, and just goes, "Hey, Don, did you have an English voice for that scene yet?" And he goes, "No." And she goes, "Talk to him a second." And I said, "Hey, how are you?" And she goes, "Will that work?" And he goes, "Yeah, that's fine." And so we go out, and she said, "Great. So you're gonna." She goes, "There's this bit where they go to a movie. It's watching like a Merchant Ivory film, and we keep hearing these absurd lines from the film that the cast is reacting to as they watch this over the top like English period piece." And I said to her, "I don't have my SAG card or anything yet." She goes, "I don't care. It is the amount of time and money it will save me not having to listen to do casting of 50 people to find somebody who sounds like you. We'll pay the fee to hire you, even though you're not union, and do that." So then 4 days later, I show up on set because they were like, "No, we're just going to have you come in where we're shooting the show and record it on the microphones there because that's easy enough." So I come in, they give me the thing, I stand in the middle of the living room set, they bring the mics down, I record 5 absurd lines for this like fake Merchant Ivory type movie. And the director, whose name escapes me right now, was like he'd started as an actor. I think he was one of the actors in like the Revenge of the Nerds movies in the '80s, and now he's like a big comedy director. So I went in and recorded those and left, and so that was my first voiceover job. It got me my union card. I still get residuals. I still get paid from it because it's a network TV show. That was my first voiceover job. And then I didn't do voiceover again for a while because I was training, and then I went to Lambda, and then I got to New York, and then when I got to New York, then I had agents actually say, "Oh, we're going to send you out for voice now." But that was technically my first voice job, and not only was it the first job that came about in an absurd way, but it got me my SAG card. It paid for my SAG card. And by having my SAG card, it meant that when I got to New York and I was auditioning for theater, I was able to just join Equity, and I could then hit like anywhere from 3 to 5 open auditions a day because I didn't have to wait in the non-equity line. I could just walk straight in. So that one, happenstance voiceover job that I got in 2003 via dumb luck because the casting director was just like, "I don't want to have to listen to 40 people who sound like you just to find someone who sounds like you," kind of gave me a massive jump, a massive bump in my career in terms of later on giving me the ability to audition for stuff. Like it meant that it was the thing that meant that my first year in New York, I was able to audition for like 700 things because I could just go to open calls and I could go to 3 or 4 or 5 a day because I didn't have to wait in line because I was a union member.
Wow. No, that's
Yeah.
that's absolutely amazing, everything. Especially hearing that sort of thing. Again, going back to that whole idea of being good at your craft and obviously knowing what you know at the same time, but also just being in the right place at the right time somehow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's absolutely amazing.
It was that thing of like working an awards show is it's something where you think, "Oh, well, that's going to help me with an acting part of it." But as you said, like it meant that I got access to places because of the other job I was doing. So I got to go into studios. I got to meet people and things like that who, then at least knew who I was, even if they knew me from something else. But again, like I walked into that, and I don't know whether she was a producer or casting, but the woman who brought me in was like, "Okay, but you're not literally some fool off the street. You already are, people who work in this industry in something I know of, an award show that we just were at 2 nights ago, consider you a trustworthy enough human being to like send you out to places. So you're probably not a criminal."
But no, that's absolutely fantastic and everything. Now, speaking about, of course, going into the comic book side of things. Now, obviously, everyone knows you for Magneto in X-Men '97. Like with season one having been a huge success, you and the actors across the board were amazing in that
Thank you.
series. I cannot wait to see season two. It's going to be fantastic. But that wasn't your first rodeo in the comic book world. You've also stepped into other roles from whether it's been Nightmare from Hulk Where Monsters Dwell, which is my intro to your work
Oh,
to
cool.
Etrigan in Batman the
Right.
Doom that came to Gotham. What was it like in particular to step into the comic book world for the very first time?
I mean, it was a lot of fun. I did not grow up a rabid comic book fan. I went to boarding school, and so there were always comic books around, and you read what you could get your hands on. But most of the stuff that we had, most of the stuff that people who were collecting comic books that I was at school with were reading were like they were things from like 2000 AD. It was like Judge Dredd and stuff like that they were reading. So that was kind of what I had, and like the one comic book, the one sort of like classic superhero character I remember was there was at one point they did a crossover with Judge Dredd and Batman, where they kind of like bounced back and forth between their worlds because somebody kind of realized like these two characters are kind of similar in a way, and would actually probably in a lot of ways agree with each other and also drive each other crazy, which so that's it's kind of great. Um, and that iteration of and I don't even remember too well what happened in that particular run of the comic, but that to me was especially going to do the Doom that came to Gotham, because the Doom that came to Gotham is a much more sort of like alternative version of Batman. It was fun because it was one where when the director sort of was calling me about it, he said, the thing with Batman is that of a lot of the big comic book characters, he exists in a very real world. Like even the bad guys in a Batman comic, for the most part, if they're superhuman, it's like Bane because they're on steroids or something, or they've created something, or this, or like the Joker doesn't have any powers; he's just evil as hell. He said so. In the iteration for the Doom that came to Gotham, though, he's having to deal with the supernatural and the metaphysical for the first time, which, of course, for a character that is so logical and so determined to find actual solutions to things through thinking through them is just a mind blowing experience. And then I didn't know Etrigan or Jason Blood that well, and the director, when he approached me about it, he said, so the easy part is Jason Blood just sounds like you. He just sounds like an English guy in his 40s or 50s who grew up and went to boarding school in England kind of thing. He said Etrigan sounds like a monster, and I've done a good amount of like monsters and creatures and things like that. He said, so we wanted you to kind of do both. He said, the trick is that Etrigan does need to be intimidating, but he also talks like a Dr. Seuss character. And I said, how do you do that? He goes, I don't know. That's your problem. You figure it out. And he was, of course, joking. Like but it was the fun part of like getting to play with that one was to work out how to do that, how to take a character that is you don't kind of know going through it. Is Jason Blood and Etrigan a good guy or a bad guy to Batman in this? And it turns out he's sort of helping him. But trying to make a character that is intimidating and has this presence, but also kind of talks like the Cat in the Hat it's a weird request, and it's fun to figure out. And also, like as you said, the first one I did was Nightmare for the Where Monsters Dwell for Hulk. The thing that was great about that was actually that was one that we recorded as a complete cast in a room, and so. Everybody in that, getting to watch everybody work is amazing because you don't get to do that a lot in voiceover. That's one of the bummers about it, is that most of the stuff I do, literally in this booth here, every now and then I have to go into a studio, but most of the time we record it from here. Getting to go in and do that and watch, Fred Tatasciore and Liam O'Brien and people like working, like getting to watch Fred do the Hulk for 4-hour sessions is mind blowing, because nobody should be able to maintain that kind of voice and then switch out of it at the end and just sort of chat normally and it have had no deleterious effect on his vocal cords at all. And that's just Fred. Fred is just literally mechanically built differently from other people. And he's just so good at doing that kind of stuff. And getting to watch, all of these people in the room work was so much fun, and I think gave us so much more because it gave us stuff to play with. And it was, the thing about stepping into like comic books and things like that is that they only usually work if it's based on actual human decisions and emotions. If you're trying to make them over the top and big, that doesn't work unless it's based on something actually human. Just making a over the top big, character for the sake of being an over the top big character, it's not going to actually land, and it's not going to make anybody care.
Absolutely. No, that's absolutely fantastic in all that regard as well. And especially because, like, as we know that we've been getting a lot of live action adaptations, not just in terms of stories, but in terms of characters from across the comic book world, whether in DC to the Marvel universe and everything. But my question to you, are there any particular characters or storylines from either of those worlds that you personally would love to see them adapt for live action that we haven't seen before, or that many fans have been wanting to see for a long, long time?
Hmm. It's stuff like the Spider-Verse movies. were one that, is I'm so glad that they did, and they did so well. Like the Beyond the Spider-Verse movies, they did those so well. All of those are just fantastic. Um, we're in a weird place because the last like 15 years there's been such an explosion in super, and when you ask that, in my mind I think of more the superhero ones than comic in general, because comics can to spread across everything, every sort of genre, but I think in terms of like the superhero stories and things like
Mm.
that. And like we had so much of it in the last 15 years, and so much of it has been based on the big characters that everybody kind of knows. I think what's going to be really interesting, and I can't give you specific examples right here, but I think what's going to be really interesting is, now that a lot of those have been done, I'm hoping that the studios don't just try and keep redoing them, but actually go, okay, what are some of the smaller characters that we can actually use for to investigate different parts of the human experience? It doesn't have to be the hero's journey of saving the world kind of thing. It's like, okay, what can we actually do? And like one of the things that's been fun is the Netflix and now the Marvel versions of like the Daredevil and the Jessica Jones. Like the first season of Jessica Jones was so good, and it was such a small story, but it was so good. The David Tennant one, with her and David Tennant, like that whole thing was just phenomenal. And it wasn't this massive, save the world kind of thing. It was just sort of her in this sort of small thing, and sort of similar with the Daredevil one. And the Daredevil one is getting a little bigger, and the Punisher ones are getting a little bigger. But keeping those kind of local ones and doing the watching them have to navigate that sort of stuff locally in a smaller story where it's not the entire world, it maybe just be their world, or that's just the people around them. Those are starting to be the ones that really interest me more than world-ending event kind of things,
Mm.
because some of them, like we've seen so much of that stuff now. It's like, okay, how many more times can the world be about to implode or explode or replode or whatever it is? It's the smaller ones that are really are really interesting to me now.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree on that sense. And that's the beauty of like with someone, for example, in the DC side of things, how James Gunn is known for taking like obscure or smaller characters,
Mm.
basically taking the characters that have never been adapted in live action or should have been adapted in live action a long, long time ago, and not just sticking with like the really heavy hitters for
Mm.
like the films and stuff. He's trying to add like a mixture of those two things. I think for me personally, I'd love to see them continue to do something like that in both the DC side of things and the Marvel side of things. Like in the Marvel side of things, when we're talking about Doctor Strange and everything, I would
Sure.
love to see them adapt Nightmare as a villain for a future Doctor Strange film, because I know that was one of the
Yeah.
villains that they wanted to do for Doctor Strange, what would eventually become Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness and everything. I would love to see that happen in a third Doctor Strange movie or whatever big crossover type of film, like Midnight Suns, for example, something
Sure.
along those lines. That would actually be really, really amazing, and everything. Because I know everyone likes to joke about it, in that Hulk and Thor have become the punching bags, literally and figuratively, of the MCU. Doctor
Right.
Strange has kind of fallen into that trap a little bit. As amazing as Benedict Cumberbatch is,
Mhm.
he's now just got to be waiting for that one Doctor Strange movie that's like his Thor Ragnarok. That's going to be like,
Right.
you know what? Let's bring it up to the level that it needs to be at. I personally loved the first Doctor Strange movie and Multiverse of Madness, and I cannot wait to see what they're going to do next in the MCU and everything.
Yeah, and he's great. Like he's, as you said, like he's so good. Benedict Cumberbatch is so good, and is so good in that. Like one of the things that the MCU has just been exceptional at, almost across the board, is casting. And it's whether they're using somebody who is a name, or in the case of like Chris Hemsworth, being like, no, that guy is going to be able to shoulder a franchise across multiple films, multiple things. Like their casting has been absolutely exceptional, and they've done a really good job of finding the right people to make even the more esoteric characters really memorable, and people who could not just do a good version of the superhero, the supervillain of the character, but just do a good version of the character itself. Like I would be very hard to get a solid answer if they think Loki was going to be as big a part of all of it as it ended up being, or is it just they were like, we can't not use Hiddleston because he's just too much fun to watch.
Who knows exactly? I mean,
Yeah.
because I know there was a lot of that behind the scenes stories, and I think that because they have talked about that one that originally Tom Hiddleston auditioned for the role of Thor and everything,
Right.
and they even showed off the audition tape and stuff, and then they were like, you know what? You're actually better for Loki, and that's just how it came about and everything. So it's like you said, they're just really solid when it comes to their casting decisions, and somehow things just work out and stuff. In
Yeah.
spite of the fact that they were hit with like a lot of creative backlash, like a lot of really big things in the last few years, like especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic era, with the movies and stuff just not hitting quite on that level. And it's like, why do you think they're doing Secret Wars? They're basically just saying we're going to wrap up the multiverse thing. We're going to get rid of a lot of the stuff that just did not work. That way we can start fresh and go straight to the stuff that everyone has been waiting for and that we've been waiting to do for a long, long time, the X-Men.
Hmm. Yeah. And the pandemic made it threw a wrench in everything in every part of the planet, and so like especially in a part of our industry that relied so much on people congregating together in a closed space, it was going to be it was going to have a massive impact on that, and it did. It there the I think at this point I think I saw that last year the box office finally kind of got up close to the total amount that it was in like 2019. But that's not accounting for increase in ticket prices or anything like that. Like the total number of people going is still way down. It's never come back from where it was pre-pandemic. And so when you're talking about movies that require five, six, seven, 800, $1 billion, box office in order to for people to not immediately begin saying, well, now these were failures, these didn't do well and stuff like that. And also when all of a sudden you have to rejig everything you're doing because how you planned to release stuff and is out the window, like whether it's order or what format and things like that. And all of a sudden you go, we had this incredibly elaborate plan for how this was all going to be released and how it works together, and that's all just been blown out of the water. Like it was always going to need, like, okay, we already are committed to the things we're committed to. We're going to have to do a little bit of a rejig, and that was one of the things that happened with our show. Was that our show was originally supposed to air the year before it aired. It was because,
Right.
well, we came out in 24. It was supposed to come out in 23, but Marvel just sort of went, we have so much coming out in 23 because of stuff backlogged from the pandemic and this and that and all these others. And they had so many shows coming out on Disney Plus, and they had so many movies and things coming out that they literally just went, we don't have space for this stuff. And so it got kicked to the following year because they said, okay, well, next year, all we've got is Deadpool and Wolverine, and then we'll add in X-Men 97, and then we have Spider-Man. I think there was one other thing. But they're like, okay, we're all of this stuff is coming out in 23. It's too much. So we're going to push it for another year so that we can start to provide some space. Because otherwise, things, people only have so much time. And you
Hmm.
only have so much time to watch stuff and consume stuff. And so if it's all coming out nonstop, even if it's stuff you love, eventually you just go, I got to go outside. I can't sit and watch a screen anymore. I got to do something that is my life and not watching other people experience theirs.
No, that's absolutely true in that regard as well. And I think especially because in that fact, it's like as you said, I think it was definitely a blessing in disguise that they pushed X-Men 97 to the
Hmm.
year after in 2024 and stuff, because that was a very X-Men heavy year for not just with X-Men 97, but also with Deadpool and Wolverine as well.
Yeah.
That was teasing the waters for not just bringing back a lot of the like a lot of those classic X-Men characters from, but also a lot of the other Marvel characters that existed before the MCU, from Blade to bringing Channing Tatum back as Gambit, or re bringing him into that universe when he
Right.
was supposed to get a solo movie and everything. So really kind of setting the stage for what would eventually become Secret Wars and saying, this is what Secret Wars is going to feel like, but times that by 1,000 and
Hmm.
everything. And also to help get people ready for the X-Men when they bring them into the live action movies and everything, which is fantastic. Now, speaking about, of course, with X-Men, with X-Men 97, how did that end up coming about for you?
That was just an audition that came to me through my agents. It was like any of the other, 10 auditions that come in every day. The only thing that was different was that the supervising director on it, Jake Castorena, he had been on Justice League action that my wife Rachel played Wonder Woman in. So I mean, she knew him much better, but I knew Jake a little too. So we already knew Jake, and Jake actually sent us a message saying, "Hey, you're probably going to get this audition for this project, and this is the working title, and these are the things." He said, "I can't tell you a lot, but what I can tell you is it is what you think it is, and we are actually looking to cast voice actors." And so the reason why that's important is a lot of the time when you get an audition come in, and you kind of like, I remember very clearly when the audition came in that was He-Man for Kevin Smith. I was like, I know what this is. Oh no, Thundercats. I'm sorry. Was it He-Man or Thundercats? Thundercats, I think.
Yeah.
One of those two, I can't remember. And I remember going like, oh, I know what this is, and I remember this show, and I love this. And then I looked at it, and I was like, there was something about the audition. I could tell him like, it's kind of what we were talking about earlier. I was like, he's going to cast this from people he knows, who he's like, I know what you do, and that's what I want, and this is who I want to work with. And that was what he did, and it was great, and I have no problem with him doing that. But there's certain projects that come in, and you just go like, oh, I know they're going to be able to find somebody who's really good, who's already well known for this. And so it's not that you still do it, and you still take it seriously, but you don't maybe spend quite as much time, especially when what you're getting is a voice match, and they say, hey, we want it to sound like this character. You may listen to it and be like, yeah, I can kind of do that, so I'm just going to do it and move on. This, because we'd had, that heads up from Jake, we went, oh, okay. So we spent more time listening to all the samples again and going like, okay, what can I actually do? And like they'd sent kind of everything because this was early in the process and they didn't know which of the original cast was available or was willing to come back or was interested or any of that kind of stuff. So they were kind of sending out everything being like, well, we don't know if we're going to have anybody back because they all may just go like, nah, we're done. Leave us alone. So we had to kind of listen through all of the characters and go like, okay, what do we think we might be able to do? And then send those in. And then of course, like the entire original cast, or almost the entire original cast who are still around came back. And so then some of the roles just were not available kind of thing. So it came about in about as normal a way as it can. I got an email, the breakdown, all the samples of characters, and it had like a different name, but all of the video samples were just from X-Men the animated series. So you go, sometimes they do that for something else, and they're like, well, these are going to sound like we're redoing G.I. Joe. We're not going to make it G.I. Joe. We're going to use the characters from Mask because it's kind of similar and that'll give us what we need. So you think, oh, they're redoing Mask. Oh, no, it's G.I. Joe. This was one where, like, maybe it was that, but Jake's email told us, no, this is actually what you think it is. So at first I was worried about telling that story that Disney would be like, what are you doing telling people that, Jake? But it's been long enough now that I've told it a couple of times. And so far he has not apparently got a phone call from Disney legal or Marvel legal being like, stop telling people things. So I think we're okay. But yeah, that was a case of, us being lucky that through a show that my wife had done, we had some people on the inside who could at least tell us, hey, this is real. It is what you think it is. And knowing that if we delivered a good audition, we had somebody on the inside who was like, no, and I know them, they're good, we should hire them, kind of thing.
Wow. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And it turned out to be a massive, massive success with X-Men 97. You, as I said earlier before, you and everyone across the board were fantastic
Thank
within
you.
that first season alone. I cannot wait for season two to come out. Now, last time that you and I spoke was at Metro Comic Con a couple of years back
Mhm.
here in Melbourne, Australia,
Yeah.
where we obviously got to talking a little bit about the iconic speech that Magneto gave to the UN.
Hmm.
To, of course, the iconic panel from the comics where Wolverine gets the adamantium ripped out of his body and everything.
Yeah.
But when it came down, not just with regards to X-Men 97, but with any sort of project that you've worked on, when you think back to like a lot of the moments that had sort of like the hairs standing up on your neck in a way, were there any particular stories that really stood out to you that was just like, wow, I didn't think they would go this far with this project or with this character in particular?
I mean, in '97, it was funny. The laws of attraction scene where he pulls the adamantium out of Wolverine was one where there was a couple of times in the first season where I would get a script and then we would get into the session and I would sort of say, they're really like, has Marvel signed off on this? And they would go, yeah. And like that was one of them being like, how's it gonna look? And Jake sort of and Bo saying, No, it's going to be like it's going to look like a panel from a comic. Like it's going to freeze on a thing that is as graphic as the comic was. That the other one that is fun was when and I remember which episode it was. Like I think it was 8 or 9. It might have been 9. When Eric tells Charles to shut up, being like, Marvel's okay with someone telling Xavier to shut up. They're like, as long as it's Magneto, they're totally fine with it. I was like, great, that's awesome, because that's not usually that was kind of one where you're like, it makes complete sense from these two people who are such good friends and so close. Like that's who's going to be like, you need to shut up. You just talk all the time, kind of thing. And then the other part in that one, as far as making the hair on my neck stand up, my favorite scene in the first season is still the one in episode 5 in Genosha when Eric is trying to protect the Morlocks and like has Leech like hanging on to him, and he's he slips back into German and he says, don't be scared right before they just get obliterated. That's still my favorite moment in the first season of mine. My favorite moment in the entire season or my favorite bit in the entire season is when Rogue just goes ape in like episode 7, just cuts a swath through everything like that. I think that episode for her character is phenomenal because it goes through so much in that one. But of the stuff I did after that, which is my favorite episode and my favorite bit of the show, my favorite scene of the ones that I did in season 1 is that bit in episode 5 when he slips back into German.
Wow. No, that is absolutely fantastic. And that definitely is true. That Genosha episode is one of the best episodes, not just from the series, but anything that Marvel's released in a really long time. Is of course was based on the Cassandra Nova run, who we would eventually get to see in Deadpool and Wolverine and stuff.
Right.
And and of course now everyone obviously knows about like that a lot of the behind the scenes drama that was happening with Bo Mayo at the time and everything. But and obviously now where we're getting with season 2, and of course we're now going to be getting season 3, of course. Without it obviously spoiling anything, how much should us fans be excited for what's to come in season 2, and especially with regards to season 3, in spite of all the behind the scenes drama that was happening when season 1 was released?
Yeah, I mean, like I'll be honest, we found out when kind of everybody else did that there was a change in who was running the show. Like we had, and when I say we, I mean the cast. We had no inkling or foresight or anything. Like all of the work that I had done on the show, everything had been great. And part of that is like whatever might be going on when they people, for understandable reasons, people sometimes treat actors kind of with kid gloves, and it's like we're not going to freak them out by letting them know anything weird is happening. And sometimes that's great, and sometimes you're like, I would like to have known if you guys are having a hard time. But we knew nothing about any of that until it all sort of until we found out that he wasn't coming back for season 2. And so all of that sort of behind the scenes stuff we kind of weren't privy to, because like I said, I've recorded except for one session for I think actually season 3. Everything else I've recorded here in the sound room in my home. So like I'm not in the office and I don't see any of that. And some other people are in studios in LA, but again, those are studios, they're not at like the production offices. So we as actors kind of aren't privy to any of that. In terms of season 2, like the thing that's bummed me out the most is that it's taken 2 years to get season 2 out. Like season 2 should have come out in 25, and just by virtue of like it's this weird thing of the way that animation is made now is that a lot of the animation is done overseas, and those people who are doing it have such heavy, like such crowded schedules that if something gets missed, like the next open slot in their schedule, their ability to do it is not like in 2 weeks time, it's in like 14 months time. And
Wow.
so once they were moving some stuff around, they kind of, to their credit, they realized very quickly, we can't rush this to get it into the slot in the pipeline that we have. We just can't do that. So rather than trying to rush everything to get it in, we're just gonna. I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think what they effectively did is they just put season 2 into the slot that they already had scheduled for season 3. So that's why season 2 is kind of coming out when season 3 would have come out if 2 had come out last year. because they were like, we're not going to rush this and run the risk of screwing stuff up or like it being half-assed. We're going to take the time we need because we have a slot in the animation schedule where we can get it in. So that I think is a massive credit to production that they didn't just decide, screw it. Everybody likes season one. We can probably get away with half-assing season two. And if it looks a little weird, who cares? Like, they actually decided that we're just going to take the time and get it done. And the fun part is like, similar to season one, you only get this. I've only got the scripts for the episodes I'm in, and none of us are in every episode. So I have no idea I have no idea what happens with a bunch of the other characters and a bunch of the other, things. Because like, as you saw at the end of season one, like we were kind of split along like three different places. So like, I only know what happens where I am. I have no idea while, stuff is happening where I am. I didn't get the scripts for what's happening elsewhere. So I'm kind of excited too because I got no idea. Like I'll talk to other cast members and be like, "Wait, what are you doing in season two?" They're like, "Oh, I'm doing this and this. What are you doing?" And we kind of get no. If we really wanted to, I'm sure we could go into the office and sit and read it all. But like, I'm more excited to just get to wait and watch it.
Absolutely. No, and based on the trailer that they've dropped for season two and everything, it looks absolutely fantastic. I honestly cannot wait for the season to come out this year, and especially for season three and stuff. And it's as you said, that they're really taking the time to deliver the absolute best they can with this, and not just saying, you know what, season one was great. Let's just get this out there and stuff, even though it's like a half-assed attempt. It's like, no, we need to go all the way with something like this. We can't afford to mess this up.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Absolutely.
it's it's much better than the alternative.
No, definitely, definitely. Now, of course, as everyone knows, that we're going to get the X-Men live action movie after Secret Wars and everything, and we've got the reintroduction of the original X-Men from
Hmm.
Patrick Stewart to Ian McKellen to James Marsden in Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars and everything. But my question to everyone out there, let me know in the comments below. Who do you want to see cast as the X-Men for that new X-Men movie after Secret Wars? And leave a like or a comment if you really want to see Matthew Waterson or any of the X-Men 97 cast make Stanley cameos in the live action movies in Avengers Doomsday, Secret Wars, or even bigger, the new X-Men movie. That would be amazing.
I will say so. The weekend that Deadpool and Wolverine came out, Ross Marquand, who plays Xavier, and I were doing a convention in Texas, and we were like, "Oh well, let's go and see it on Friday night." So we went to see the movie on Friday night, and we came out of it, and we both had, or I think we both had the same thought, which is like, if season one had come out last year, there's at least a fleeting chance that maybe only Cal, but maybe like that they would have been like, oh, one of the times when Deadpool jumps, let's have him just jump into the animated one because we're like that would have been so much fun. And we're like, I feel like we both were like, I feel like there's a really good chance if we had come out in 23 when we were supposed to that they might have thrown that in for Deadpool and Wolverine just because like the Deadpool movie is the kind of movie where you could kind of do that and have Ryan Reynolds suddenly find himself in an animated version and just be like, what the and and do that like that would have been even if they just used like Cal and had the animated Wolverine be one that he went to trees like gets to that and just goes, well, this is going to be weird if I have to take him back to live action, but whatever, let's give it a whirl kind of thing. Like that would have been really fun.
Well, it is Marvel we're talking about. They're planning to go really hard with Doomsday and Secret Wars, so it wouldn't cross my mind. It certainly would not cross my mind if they suddenly said, you know what? Yep, let's get the X-Men 97 cast into this, even if it's just like small cameos and stuff. That would be fantastic. Absolutely amazing. Now, going across into the other franchises you worked on, from
Mhm.
obviously from doing Harry Potter through in Hogwarts Legacy to Devil May Cry, the animated series, to Dune Awakening, being part of the
Mhm.
Dune universe and everything. What was it like playing across all these different franchises?
It's not the it is one of the things that I love most about voice acting is that unless you're Samuel L. Jackson, you don't get to be in Star Wars and Marvel and Star Trek and and all of these massive franchises because all of them take too much time. They just they there's too much involved in the shoots, which can be 10 months, and then the press tours, and like you can't be in too many of these things. Like nobody has that amount of time. In voiceover, you can. I've got to do Marvel, I've got to do X-Men, I've got to do Game of Thrones, I've got to do, Harry Potter and Star Wars and, Fallout and like I've got to do and like the Call of Duties and I've got to do Halo and I've got to do Dune and I've got to like I couldn't if I was the biggest most commercial star in the world doesn't get to do that much. The Rock when he was at his most like busy was in like four franchises and that was burning the candle at 12 ends. Like it was taking all the time the poor guy had. You just can't do that. But in voiceover you 100% can. And that's the really cool thing is that like especially like my kids are kids, they're 4, 6 and 8, and they're at the age where they're starting to like understand like, oh, we understand Star Wars and we understand this and we understand that. And for my wife and I being able to be like, yeah, we're in that and we're in that and we got to like we've got to be a part of all of these things is amazing. And you can't, like I said, you can't do that in live action because it's just too time consuming. So it's really really cool kind of and I got to be honest, like when X-Men came out is when I started doing some conventions. Like that when we met in Melbourne, that was my first year still of doing shows. I'd only started in like March of that year, and I think that was like June or July. Um, and it wasn't until I started doing those and started doing conventions, and then started doing some of the interviews and things around X-Men. When someone sort of like you just did, it was like, well, you've got to do this, this, and this, and this, and you go, oh, I have, because most of the time we're just trying to get the next job. You go in and you work and you have a blast, and then you're like, great, I need another job because I have to, keep living and keep supporting a family and things like that. And you don't often get the opportunity to stop and look back and go like, oh, I've got to play in all these incredible sandboxes. And so it's one of the nice things about doing, conventions and doing interviews and things is when someone actually makes you stop and take a moment and say, hey, you've got to do this thing that I love. And you're like, right, I did. I spent, 3 or 4 days working on that 3 years ago. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And you actually get to talk about it. So it is the thing that I love. It is, like I said, one of the things I love most about voice acting is getting the chance to be a part of all of these different IPs and franchises. And so, there's almost no other, there's very little else you can do creatively where you get to do that. Writers have to spend too much time. They can't, maybe like episodic directors can like jump in and out of those things. If those things have TV shows, like you could have an episodic director who's directed some Marvel stuff and some DC stuff and some Star Wars episodes and some Fallout and some, something of like the Halo show and stuff like that. You could maybe do that, but still every one of those episodes is months of work when you factor in the pre-production, shooting, and the post. Voice acting is one of the few places where you kind of get to play in any sandbox that people will have you.
Absolutely. No, that is definitely true in that regard. And of course, now, as we know, we've been getting a lot of live action video game adaptations in the last few years, whether it's been the Fallout series, which just finished season 2, and we're getting The Last of Us season 3 like sometime this year, which rest in peace to Catherine O'Hara, of course. I did like my little tribute to her and everything, like in a video I posted. But now looking across at like all the video game properties that you've done over the like across your career and everything, what is like one video game property that could see translated really well into a live action movie or TV show that is very different from what's been shown beforehand?
Actually, the one that they've just announced that so far I think the casting is phenomenal is God of War. Like the
Hmm.
God of War thing, like Ryan Hurst. It's funny. I was talking about that with some of the people who I'd got to work on it with just this last week, and like Ryan Hurst is such good casting for Kratos. He's such good casting for Kratos, and like I don't know the work of all of the people who they've announced yet necessarily, but just by visual, like the casting looks phenomenal. But like in that franchise specifically, like it is all about casting Kratos, and they did a great job. Like he's going to be brilliant at it, and that's one where like that world is so different from so much of it's kind of similar to Vikings a little bit if you're taking the Ragnarok version of it, which I think is the one they're doing, where they're starting with the show, because they've also cast they've cast Thor, which Ryan played in the game, but they've also cast Mimir and Duncan, who played Mimir in the game and is doing it in the movie in the show, is brilliant. Like So that's one where I'm like, oh, so much of it is the casting and the people who do it, who are making it, understanding it, and by that casting, I think that's a really good indication that they understand it. Yeah, so I think that one is that's one that I didn't even know that they were planning to do that until they announced the casting a week or two ago, and I was really happy about that. I think that he's brilliant, and I think that's going to be really really good. In terms of ones that haven't been done yet, uh, that's a really good question. Because yeah, they finally cracked the formula in the last few
Mm.
years because they had so much trouble with adapting games for so long, and then in the last like 5 years they figured it out, which is brilliant. Um, what was fun? I mean, so I don't know how they would do this one. This one would require probably even more creativity from the showrunner parts. But there was a game that I did like 10 years ago. That's like a puzzle game. What was it called? Shoot, I might have to look up what the title of the game was called. But it was absolutely brilliant, and it was an island where there were all these puzzles, and you would collect like recordings from the people who'd done it, and it was like me, and it was Phil Lamar, and it was Ashley Johnson, and it was Tara Deva, I think, and it was like a mystery. It was like a mystery solution one, and that I think would be really cool because it's kind of a setup like Lost or something where like
Mm.
you could drop characters in that and the entire thing is a mystery, and like the whole point of it is trying to figure out what happened to the people and what happened there, and having to do stuff to kind of work your way through it. And I think that would be kind of fun, and that would be like an esoteric one. That would be one that is not, it doesn't as obviously lend itself to it. That would be, yeah, that would be really fun.
No, that definitely sounds like a really fun one to see that actually. And for me personally, I'd love to see them do like a live action Devil May Cry movie or TV show. That'd be a really
Mm.
solid one to see that actually. And
Yeah,
also
that'd be
just
great. I mean, I gotta say, like, I think Devil May Cry, I think it lends itself really well to animation. I think that the show that they did for Netflix, like, I was really excited when I started reading scripts for it, and then when I that was when I actually sort of sat down and watched as soon as it came out, and I thought that he did an amazing job of adapting that. Like, I think he did an amazing job of using a very using all of the things of anime
mm,
and keeping it in that world. And then also putting his own stuff into it, when he sort of wrote it, and when he put it together, and with the music and everything like that, I thought he did a really good job with that. That was a really fun one. That's a really fun one to get to have got to have been a little bit a part of.
absolutely. No, that sounds absolutely fantastic. But hey, if they can manage to do a series as ridiculous as Fallout and make it work
Yeah,
in live action, then I think anything is totally possible.
yeah.
Now, without going into any spoilers, what's next for Matthew Waterson for the fans to know about?
Let's see. Obviously, we have the next couple of seasons of X-Men. That's when we're as far as all we know is that we're doing three right now, but the hope is that we just keep getting to do it because I don't think there's any of us working on that wouldn't be happy to do that for the next 30 years. Um, I'm trying to think if there's any games that I've worked on that are out or that they've announced that are coming out, because that's the thing with games, that they put all these NDAs on, and so like I was working on stuff this week which was really cool, and none of it can I talk about for probably 3 years. um but yeah, it's that I will say this, the yeah, last year, 2 years ago, there was a massive strike in the industry for film and TV for both the actors and the writers. They resolved that. Last year there was a big strike for interactive, for video games, for actors in video games. When that ended at the end of the summer, uh, there was a sudden sort of surge of projects that all of these big games have been sort of waiting, being like, we're ready to go. As soon as this gets solved. So as soon as that got solved, a whole bunch of stuff, suddenly triggered and went. So that, I think that that'll mean that in the next, like, in probably like 18 months to 2.5 years time, there's probably going to be just this incredible run of releases of games, both like indie to AAA things, because everybody was sort of like stacking up stuff for like 8 months, 12 months, 14 months while that was all going on. And I think that there is going to be a kind of an amazing glut of really great stuff in about a year and a half. So specifics I can't really go into, but just having sort of watched that sort of come through, I'm like, oh, that's going to be a really fun period when all of this stuff starts coming out that everyone has been like, because there's that weird thing of everybody had to wait, everybody in the development teams had to wait, but it meant that they could just like tweak and work on story and work on how it looked and things like that. So I think that the stuff that's going to come out of that is going to be really strong.
No, that sounds absolutely amazing. Cannot wait to see any of that sort of stuff. And final question, what do you think Magneto would say if he was in Australia?
uh, I don't know. He has to have been to Australia, right? He can fly. He must have had like there must have been some curiosity at some point of being like, oh, that's down there. Um, Here's the tough thing. We met in Melbourne. I've been to Melbourne, but that was the first and so far only time I've been to Australia, and that was when we're like, I arrived on Friday morning and I left on Monday morning. So I'm like, I've been to Australia, but I don't feel like I've been to Australia because like I can't tell you anything about it. I can tell you about the hotel and the place where the stuff was. Like a month before when I'd gone to one in New Zealand, like I took my family, we spent a couple of weeks, but because we had just taken our small kids to New Zealand, we're like, we can't put them on another flight for 16 hours. They're going to explode. So I just went and did that one. So like, I was like Australia's, and my wife has been to New Zealand and Australia before, but I was like, I still need to come back so that I can actually see Australia. And like I have friends there. I had friends who I went to school with who are there now who I haven't been able to see. So, um, but that it means that it's kind of tough because I've got to be honest. And this is horrible, but most of my experience of Australia um, came from watching Neighbours as a kid in school. And I don't think that any more than I think Coronation Street is a valid representation of the UK. Like Neighbours is fine or far and away, but it's not. I don't think you can look at that and be like, well, now I understand Australia and Australians.
No,
I
no,
feel
no.
like
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. No, I personally would love to see them represent Australia in like media outside of like our hometown and everything. That
yeah,
isn't just us. That isn't like taking us just taking the piss out of ourselves or anything like that. I remembered I
right.
had that interview with Robin McCullum from One Piece, who played Don Quixote Doflamingo, where he was asking me this kind of question. And the end
Mm,
of the whole thing was like, it's like, do you know any Australian people that are part of like the animation world and all that kind of stuff? Well, there's the composer from Made in Abyss. They did reference Australia during the What If series in the Thor episode because of Chris Hemsworth being Australia and
right.
stuff. I'd love to see them represent of Australia more, like outside of the media that we have in our country and everything, and just
Yeah.
say, hey, Australia is an amazing place, even though we're known as the land down under, literally and figuratively. So
Well, the funny thing is the amount of Australian actors who are in the MCU or in the like that it's not like there's a dearth of people who actually know firsthand about it who like you're right that there's enough people that that you would think that there would have been a little bit more push of like, well, what I can speak clearly and eloquently about is where I grew up.
absolutely. No, that definitely is true. That definitely is true. And look, if they can manage to make like Squid Game, for example, like be as
Right.
popular as it is and help bring Korean culture to an international audience and everything, then I think Australia can easily do then one day Australia is going to have their chance in the spotlight from an international perspective as
Hmm.
well. It's just a matter of not a question of if, just a matter of when.
Yeah. Well,
Personally,
this and
anyway.
like the one show, like the one show over here, and I was just trying to remember, and of course the title is completely gone out of my head. Um, but the show that has done really well here is the main character's name is Ray. It's the one of the like it's a crime one. It's one of the like the hitman. What is the show's name? Shoot. I think it's finished now. It ran for like 3 or 4 seasons, but it's like there've been a couple of things which have cracked over here that have done have done well and have definitely sort of lodged in the consciousness. But yeah, it hasn't there hasn't been like you said there hasn't been like a Squid Game sort of thing yet.
Absolutely. As they say, not a question of if, just when.
Yeah,
But no,
surely.
that just cannot wait to see all that stuff happening. Matthew
Yeah.
Waterson, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honor.
Thank you, Simon. It's been a pleasure.
Anytime, mate. And is there anything you'd like to say to the fans out there in Australia and in the world?
Just thank you. Like you watching stuff and being entertained and consuming this kind of stuff is has given me the ability to do this for a living, which is insane. Like there's a bit. It's like no adult should be able to do this for a living, but I'm able to and I'm allowed to, and I'm incredibly grateful for that every day. So yeah, I'm very grateful for everybody who watches and enjoys this kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And we're grateful to see like actors such as yourself help bring all that to life and just take it from being we're like amazing to extraordinary and
Thank you.
beyond the stratosphere, without a doubt. It's absolutely fantastic. Well, guys, if you'd like to check out more on Matthew Waterson, you can catch X-Men 97 Season 2, which is going to be premiering mid-2026, which you can catch on Disney Plus very, very easily. And you can also check out his other work, which put links to in the description below if you want to find out more about Matthew's other work, current and upcoming. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below what is your favorite role of Matthew Waterson's, and don't forget to check out the links in the description below and in my channel. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. This is Simon and Matthew Waterson signing off. Goodbye for
Have a
now.
good day.